Naoth and Ramah, and went and said to Jonathan, What have I done? What is my iniquity, and what is my sin before your father, that he seeks my life? So what's just happened? The incident in 19. The naked thing of Saul, but he's done what to David? What has Saul done to David? Tried to kill him multiple times, right? Sent messengers, many multiple times he's happened. And so with that incident in mind, he's going to flee, and he says, what have I done? Why is he trying to kill me? And so he is going to, he's addressing Jonathan in this way because at this point in the matter, he's trying to find out, do you know what's going on? Did you know this? Did you know that your father was going to come after me in this way? What have I done, and how have I deserved this? And so that's why Jonathan answers back, by no means. In other words, I had no idea that this was coming about. I had no idea that he was sending messengers and all of that is going on. You shall not die by any means. You know, you shall not die. And my father will do nothing, either great or small, without first telling me. And why would he hide this thing from me? It is not so. In other words, I can't believe that he would do this and not tell me. He's never done things and not shared them with me before. And so I had no idea, David, that this was coming about. In verse 3, David says he took an oath again and said, Your father certainly knows that I've found favor in your eyes. And he said, Do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives and your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death. And so he says, Jonathan, your dad knows that we're friends. Your dad knows, and so he's keeping this stuff purposely from you. And I am just, at any moment, going to be killed. There's just a step between me and death. I mean, when someone tries to kill you, the number of times, we know, what, 5, 6 that we've read so far that we know of.
Accidentally.
Yeah, it's not an accident anymore, right? Right, absolutely. You know, and he's the king, the most powerful man in the nation, and everyone follows his wishes and desires. Your days are numbered as far as you're concerned.
Do you think that David is thinking here that Saul is wanting to kill him because of his relationship with Jonathan? Is that what he's saying?
No, he's saying that he knows that we're such good friends. He's not going to let you know that he is trying to kill me. Okay. He's not going to tell you this, even though you think that your father tells you all his plans. He's not going to let you know about this because he knows we're friends.
Okay, gotcha.
And so, but he says, and so he's recognizing that he's in a very precarious situation here with Saul. And Jonathan said to David, whatever you yourself desire, I will do it for you. So he's laying it out. What do you need, David? What do we need to handle this situation? So here's two best friends who are linked together with a heart love for each other and trying to figure out what do we do. Of the two of them, I almost have a deeper sympathy for Jonathan because he's in such a terrible position. Mm-hmm. He has a loyalty to his father that is, at that time, would be all-encompassing. His father is the king, he's also his father, and by all rights, his loyalty should always be there. Mm-hmm. But he's also tied in a heart way with David and knows that God is with David. We're going to see that as we continue going on. He recognizes that God is with David, and his love for David is there too. And so he's in this position of being right smack dab in the middle of it.
Sounds like his father's training him up to be a king.
Absolutely.
And he knows David's going to be a king.
And absolutely.
And how is this going to work out?
Absolutely. Even though Saul has been told in previous chapters that your dynasty is going to be stopped. Your sons will not ever come to the throne. Evidently, under this, once the Spirit of the Lord left him, and under the power of this distressing spirit and the changes that we see happening with Saul, he either has chosen to forget it or is ignoring it and moving on, thinking that he can fix that. He can go above that and make that happen. He just needs to get rid of this pesky little kid that thinks he's going to come up and be the king.
Well, and don't you think that Saul is probably wise to the fact that Jonathan is tipping David off?
I'm sure that that's part of what he's saying here in verse 3. Don't let Jonathan know this lest he be grieved. So what he's trying to say is it's going to upset Jonathan. So he recognizes that this is something that needs to be kept from Jonathan.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's funny to me that both Jonathan and Michael, his son and his daughter, have chosen to side with David against him. So that tells you a lot about what's going on in the family dynamics too. So verse 5, and David said to Jonathan, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king to eat, but let me go that I may hide in the field until the third day at evening. So this new moon is something that would occur every month. Israel did not set under a solar calendar. That was a Roman invention. Israel set under a lunar calendar. And the new moon was when the first little sliver could be found in the sky, and it would be appointed that it was the change into the new month. And in that new month, there were sacrifices. I think, if I'm not mistaken, let me look. I think your last page has some information on the new moon. New moon offerings, that's right. Numbers 28, chapter 28, 11 through 15. It says here, at the first of every month, present to the Lord a burnt offering of 2 young bulls, 1 ram, 7 male lambs a year old, all without defect. With each bull there is to be a grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of the finest flour mixed with oil. With the ram, a grain offering of 2/10 of an ephah of the finest flour mixed with oil. And with each lamb, a grain offering of 1/10 of an ephah of the finest flour mixed with oil. This is for a burnt offering, a pleasing aroma, a food offering presented to the Lord. With each bull, there is to be a drink offering of 1/2 a hin of wine. With the ram, 1/3 of hin, and with each lamb, 1/4 of a hin. This is the monthly burnt offering to be made at each new moon during the year. Besides the regular burnt offerings with its drink offerings, 1 male goat is to be presented to the Lord as a sin offering.
So who, the high priest did this?
This is all part of the sacrifice and the offerings that were to be done each new moon, which would be 12 times a year. This is to be done. Now, this is in addition to the daily offerings and
Who performs this?
This would be done by the priests.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what? A lot of individuals brought this.
And this would be something that in individual homes and in individual areas there would also be a feast offering that would be made from the offerings that would occur. And so from this food, these things that would be done here, there would also be then food that would be eaten that would be part of the feast offering, and it would go 2 days. 2 days long, the feast offerings that occur with this. So that's why you're going to see them talking about the third day, because the feast itself is going to occur over a 2-day period. And this is going to happen every single month. And so this is happening with Saul, and the feast that occurs after the offerings is happening at Saul's table. And evidently what would happen is that all the key people in Saul's kingdom would come and gather around the table. They would be set in certain places of honor, depending on where they were at, in the service to Saul. And they would all sit around and they would commune together and eat together out of these feasts that would be part of this offering process. And so that's done every single solitary month. And so David evidently had a spot that was just his spot, so that it would immediately be recognized if he was there or not there. You wouldn't have to go around and start searching. There was a spot specifically for him, and so he would know immediately that it was that he was not there. And on the third day at evening, the feast would be over at that time. So in verse 6, he says, if your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked permission to me that he might run over to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all of the family. This is a whole nother thing. A yearly sacrifice for the family is something that, as you can see, if we sat down and did a complete study of all the sacrifices that needed to be made, this sin business is messy. You know, there's a lot that has to be done, whether it's done at a family level where it could be done, whether it's done at a priestly level, whether it's done, you know, at whatever level it needs to be done at. There's a lot of covering that has to be
You get a lot
done.
of good meals out of it.
You get a lot of good meals out of it.
See, that's a lot of animals.
It's a lot of
Yeah,
animals
yeah.
that need to be.
Like
That's why it's one of the reasons why there's a misconception on there being a tenth is the offering to the Lord. If that's the tithe that's being given to the Lord. If you actually sat down and looked at the grain and the wine and the oil and the animals and that sort of thing that is given, it is a 20% offering per year that is required of the Jewish people. 28% of what they have is required. And then on top of that are the sacrifices and the offerings that they give because they want to. When something wonderful happens or good happens or they need to make an additional sin offering or whatever needs to occur, it's even more. So the 10th offering happened twice a year. And then in addition to that, there were other offerings that needed to occur. So anytime you think that 10% is what they gave, that's not true. They gave 10% twice a year. And then additional offerings in the middle of that. And so it was, and a new baby and a marriage and whatever else would happen. And so you're looking at 28 to 30% of what they owned was given in sacrifice
And
to the Lord.
you know, all these 2 bulls and 7 sheep and all that. Was that all from each family? Not each ever. It would be offered at the tabernacle or the temple, and then it could also be offered for individual communities. But you would have to have a priest doing the offering. Like Saul couldn't make his own offering. Remember? Yeah,
he can't do that. So you would have to have a priest make an offering for that. So we're not exactly 100% sure on, we know that some things were done by a family level. David talks about it, going to Bethlehem, and his brother is calling him because the family needs to make a yearly sacrifice. So there are all different ways that those could be made, but always by a priest. That they needed to be oversight. There needed to be an oversight. I think it's funny here where he says with that permission of me that he might run over to Bethlehem. That sounds like something we would say. I'm going to run down to Modesto.
Yeah.
But he literally means to run, probably, you know.
Physically, yeah.
Which is, to do it. It just sounds funny coming from a New King James version to say, we're going to run over to Bethlehem and see how that is. So anyway, he said, so did David go to Bethlehem? I don't think he did.
He was out.
It doesn't appear that he is planning on going down to Bethlehem. So this is a little story that they've concocted, and unfortunately, this is going to set the tone for David, who seems to like to stretch the truth quite a bit to get himself out of trouble. And we're going to see that as we move along in these next couple of chapters. And so this is what Jonathan is to tell him. And so then if he, that would be Saul, says, "It's well, your servant will be safe." But if he, Saul, is very angry, then be sure that evil is determined by him. So this was going to be the testing. And if Saul said, "Oh, okay, it's all right that he went to Bethlehem," then it's not. Then we know that David's going to be all right. But if Saul says it gets very angry about him leaving, then it doesn't look good for David. Now, let's take a minute and discuss, why would Saul want David to be at his table so badly?
Your enemy's close.
Okay. So is he to be at the table so that David can try another spear trick? Is he to be at? Saul. Sorry.
Yeah.
Or is he
Maybe
wanting
he has
David
some
there
plan.
so that he has a plan? It hasn't been that long since we were just in chapter 19, and he's doing everything he can do, telling his servants and David and the messengers and everyone else to go after him. So David is attempting to see, is there any chance of reconciliation here, or what is going on? So is Saul looking for David? Obviously
Probably
he
going to just
is.
keep his eye on him. If he doesn't trust him, he's
Keep his eye on him, see what's going on. I mean, there are a whole multitude of reasons that Saul would be very interested in seeing what David is doing. Now, my question is, after what we just read and what Saul has done, why would David go back? Why would he go back?
God was with him. He knew he'd get through it.
Okay, all right,
Plus
but
he
but
was a
practically,
loyal-
why would he go
didn't
back?
though, did he?
Huh?
He doesn't go
He
back.
doesn't. But why would the why? But if he doesn't go back, but why? But if it's good, then he knows that it's safe to go
He
back.
can go back.
So the point being, why would, maybe I could phrase it this way, why would he want to go back?
He's an officer.
Okay, and what? This
He's loyal.
loyalty, his people, he's got a wife, he's got family, he's got friends, he's got a reputation, a military career. There's a lot of things riding on how Saul is going to treat David, right? And so
In
Saul's
the last scene, Saul's acting like he's going to be reformed.
perhaps, yeah. There's so many mixed signals coming from Saul, right? So many mixed signals. But ultimately, what I'm sensing when I read this is that David really would like reconciliation,
Yes.
wouldn't he? Because he knows that ultimately Saul is in the position that Saul is in because Saul was chosen to be the king of Israel. And this is an important foundational point that I'm trying to lay here, because when we get further on down the line, David is going to be given a lot of opportunities to take revenge on Saul, and he never does. He never does, even though he's given that opportunity, because Saul always has that understanding that it is not his place to take out the Lord's anointed. Even though Saul's doing all the things Saul's doing, David knows that that is not his place. And so this is a little foundational stone right here that tells us he's tried to get pinned to the wall 4 times. His wife had to make a dummy to lay in the bed so that they could fool the messengers. There's a lot going on, and yet David is still seeking reconciliation with Saul, which tells you is a little bit more telling about David's heart in all of this
And
matter.
that's why he was chosen by God. David was.
Yeah.
Saul wasn't, so there
Yeah.
you go.
And if he hears the story that this man's just been laying naked, in the city, he might think there's a possibility. But in
Maybe
his heart,
he-
he doesn't.
He maybe,
He doesn't
he
trust him.
he
Bottom
wants to
line.
know. So in verse 8 it says, "Therefore you shall deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. Nevertheless, if there is an iniquity in me, kill me yourself, for why should you bring me to your father?" So they have already made a covenant amongst themselves. What they're doing here is renewing the covenant, strengthening the covenant, making sure that that covenant bond between them is very clear on both sides. We're going to see it. We're going to see it reiterated here in a few verses. This really important covenant. But he's telling Jonathan, so hey Jonathan, if you think I've sinned, if you think there's iniquity in me, then you do the deed. Do not take me back to your father. So if you really think there's any sin in me. And so that certainly puts Jonathan in a position of standing up and saying, David, this is, I'm sure the discussion was, David, you know that I trust you and know that God is with you, and that sort of incident. So Jonathan said, "Far be it from you, for I know certainly that evil was determined by my father to come upon you. Then would I not tell you?" Which is what he did earlier. And so he's just telling David, David, we've made a covenant. Do you not know that if I knew that God, that my father was coming after you, my loyalty is with you? And so he's letting him know that. And David said to Jonathan, "Who will tell me? Or what if your father answers you roughly?" So how are you going to get the message back to me? Boy, what they wouldn't give for a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
How am I going to find out what you learned from your dad? Or what if your dad gets really angry at you and, has you beat up or has you thrown in a holding place or,
Or killed.
Or killed. He tried it, he's done it. And so, he says, how are we going to get this? And so they come up with this little plan. And Jonathan said to David, "Come, let's go out into the field." And they went into the field. And Jonathan says to David, "The Lord God of Israel is witness." I somehow think this is a stronger, more powerful oath than the one his father gave. when he says vows by the Lord's name, because I feel like Jonathan means it. Jonathan knows the strength of the vow that he's making. He says, when I've sounded out my father sometime tomorrow or the third day, and indeed there's good toward David, and I do not send to you and tell you, may the Lord do so and much more to Jonathan. But if it pleases my father to do you evil, then I will report it to you and send you away, that you may go away in safety. And the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. So it's interesting. Jonathan's just telling him, I'm going to check it out. I'm going to let you know what's going on. So it's interesting in two ways that I noticed that David speaks about his father in this statement when he says, when the Lord be with you as he has been with my father Saul. One, he recognizes that originally God was with Saul. He recognizes that. But even more currently, I have to wonder if he doesn't recognize that the Lord is, in a certain sense, still with Saul, because he's given Saul so many opportunities to repent. He's given Saul time. Saul is going to have 20 years from the time the judgment falls. And at any point during those 20 years, Saul would have the opportunity to repent. And so in a sense, that's the Lord's blessing on Saul, that he doesn't just take him out instantly and immediately, because he certainly can do that. And so the Lord, although the distressing spirit incident and all of those things happen, God is still giving Saul opportunity to repent, which is a merciful and gracious thing. Even in our day today, we say, Lord, yes, we want you to come quickly, but think of all of those who are still lost. Another opportunity for those to be saved is merciful and gracious and kind, and shows the Lord's grace.
So you're saying even after God left Saul,
right,
and the distressing
spirit
came upon him, Saul could have, his heart was not so hardened that he could have...
There's always an opportunity to change. Yep. There's always, whether you're Pharaoh or Judas or Saul, there's always an opportunity to change. And time is your friend, because at any moment during that time that God allows you to have, you can change your mind. The ones who don't get the chance are the ones who are struck dead instantly. And we see an example of that. Immediately he was killed in certain stories and situations. And so I just think it shows that Jonathan is really wise as to how the Lord is dealing with both David, with himself, and with Saul. And so what it tells us is we learn now a little bit more about Jonathan's heart. In each one of these incidents, we're getting to know the character of these people. Maybe that's why they look familiar, because we're getting to know the character of these people as we see the way they respond to a lot of these things. So we are in 13. Nope. We are in 14. And you shall not only show me the kindness of the Lord while I still live, that I may not die, but you shall not cut off your kindness from my house forever. No, not when the Lord has cut off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. All right, we've had some discussion a couple of different times of, do you think Jonathan knows what's going on? This verse tells us, yes. At this point in the game, Jonathan knows. He's saying, David, there's going to come a time when you are going to become king. And at this time, culturally, what would happen is that when one family would succeed another family, everyone in that person who's being usurped, their family would be killed. From their wives to their children to the sons to the daughters, the entirety of the family would be wiped out. Sounds drastic, but why did that happen? So that there'd be no one who would come and try and start a war to get the family lineage back again. And so what he's saying is, when it happens to you, David, when the Lord takes all of the enemies of David out of the way, remember my family in this covenant promise. Remember my people. And don't kill them, is what he's saying. Don't wipe out my family. Now, interestingly enough, is this exact situation is going to occur. Later on, down the road, we're going to see that David is going to be put in a position where this particular covenant promise about the lineage of Jonathan, his heirs, is going to be addressed. And this covenant promise is going to come to David's mind, and he's going to keep it. And so it's very important to recognize that this is something that is going to have strong circumstances, consequences down the road. All right, and so in verse 16, now Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, let the Lord require it at the hand of David's enemy. So the house of David and the house of Jonathan means it's going deeper than just David and Jonathan, just the two of them. This means all of our families, all of our heirs are now included in with this covenant that we're making. Now Jonathan again caused David to vow because he loved him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul, his own life, his own being. How many times have we heard that now in the last few chapters?
Quite a bit.
Quite a bit, right? At least 4, 5, 6 times that we've talked about the love of Jonathan and David. He loved him as he loved his own soul. We talked about how the world took that and twisted it into something it shouldn't have been. However, you can see that if you have that mindset to look at it, you can take some of these verses and twist them and turn them that way. This love between David and Jonathan was a deep, abiding, heartfelt love. And Jonathan says to David, tomorrow is the new moon and you will be missed because your seat will be empty. And when you've stayed 3 days, go down quickly and come to the place where you hit on the day of the deed and remain by the stone Ezel. So when this business was done, when the deed was done, there's a stone there and evidently it had a name. I don't know why it had a name, but it had a name. And there I'm going to shoot 3 arrows to the side as though I was shooting at a target. And then I'm going to send a lad and I'm going to say, go find the arrows. Now, here's the plan. If I say to the lad, look, the arrows are on this side of you, get them and come, then that means, as the Lord lives, that there is safety for you and you will come to no harm. So David will be able to retrieve the arrows himself and come. Everything's good. You can come back if that happens. However, if I say thus to the young man, look, the arrows are beyond you, or they're too far for you to fetch, they're too far beyond you, then go your way, for the Lord has sent you away. And as for the matter which you and I have spoken of, what would that matter be?
His father trying to kill him.
The covenant.
The
The covenant promises that we've made. These covenant promises that we've made. But as for the matter which you and I have spoken of, indeed the Lord will be between you and me forever.
So where did he stay for 3 days?
Out probably...
Could have gone to Bethlehem.
Could have gone to Bethlehem and then it wouldn't have been a lie.
Yeah.
Or could have just waited somewhere out in the field. He certainly, as a shepherd, knew how to take care of himself out in the open. And so...
3 days is plenty long to go to Bethlehem and back.
He could have, and since we're not told, we really don't know. Did he go to Bethlehem? Maybe. Did he just stay out in the field and wait? Maybe. He certainly has the tools to do that.
How far was Bethlehem from here?
Not very far. You're within walking distance of all of that. He could run to Bethlehem. Remember? Run over to Bethlehem. So it's not too far. All of this area is within Jerusalem, Bethlehem. All of this area is within a walking distance.
The next verse says.
So then David hid in the field. Yep, right then he hid in the field. And when the new moon had come, the king sat down to eat the feast. So that would be this sacrificial meal that would come each month. And the king sat in his seat, as at other times, on a seat by the wall. I think it's funny that he puts that there. He has his back to the wall, right? Because if you're suspicious, remember that statement? He had his eye on David. He's watching. If you're suspicious all the time, boy, that's a lot of stress to live under, isn't it? You sit with your back to the wall. We have a good friend of ours who's been in the police business, who, when any restaurant we go to, sits with his back to the wall and faces the door. That's his training. You know, that you, and sometimes he makes me get up from where I'm sitting because that's a better seat to meet those needs. And that's that type of thinking. It's stressful to always be on guard, on call, you know, and watching it. Yeah, and this is where Saul is at this point. And Jonathan arose and Abner sat by Saul's side. We're going to hear more about Abner later on, but David's place was empty. Nevertheless, Saul did not say anything that day, for he thought, something has happened to him. He's unclean. Surely he is unclean. So in Saul's mind, that would be the only reason that you would not come to the king's feast and take this meal. How would you get unclean? Well, there's a multitude of ways. You could touch a dead body or a dead animal. You could touch a woman. You could be, there are a lot of different ways you could be unclean. And so he's assuming, well, the only thing I can think of is that he's unclean. However, for the majority of the ways you can be unclean, they last for the day. And then the next day you're not unclean any longer. So by all rights, even if he's unclean, the next day, day 2 of the feast, he should be there. There should be no reason for that. And it happened that the next day, the 2nd day of the month, that David's place was empty. Really, you would say was still empty. And Saul said to Jonathan his son, why has the son of Jesse not come to eat either yesterday or today? So he's asking Jonathan, so that tells you what? He knows
They're friends.
that Jonathan should know all these details about what's going on in David's life. What does he call him? What's the title he gives him?
Son of Jesse.
Son of Jesse. Who is David at this point in Saul's
Son-in-law.
administration? He's his son-in-law. Let's go down the list. His general, his military leader, his soother of distressing spirits. He has a very elevated. He sits at the king's table.
The hero of his
Right,
nation.
the hero of the nation. What does he call him?
Son
of Jesse. Who's Jesse?
Nothing.
Nothing. A shepherd man in Bethlehem.
Nothing.
So he is not using any elevated title for David, but he's using the lowest title that he can come up with. David has said over and over again, who am I? I come from a family of shepherds and, we're poor and we don't have a lot. And so he's making that point, this son of Jesse. And rather than using any of the titles. So he wasn't here yesterday and he wasn't here today. So Jonathan repeats the little story that they've come up with. David earnestly asked permission for me to go to Bethlehem. And he said, please let me go, for our family has a sacrifice in the city. And my brother has commanded me to be there. And now if I found favor in your eyes, that's just a polite way of speaking of the time. Please let me go away and see my brothers. Therefore, he's not come to the king's table. Well, it seems like a reasonable story. There shouldn't be any reason that it just throws everything helter-skelter here, that he is going to go down to his... It certainly is not going to explain Saul's reaction,
But it's
is
a
my
lie
point.
even if he does go to Bethlehem.
They're stretching it, aren't they? No matter what happens. Therefore, he's not come. So now let's see how Saul reacts. Then Saul's anger was aroused against who? Jonathan. And he says to him, you son of a perverse, rebellious woman. Kind of sounds like some of the cursings we would use today. We might use a couple of other expletives, in some nasty ways. But that's what he's really doing here. He's cursing your mother, which is... goes back a long ways, doesn't it? Do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? So he's dragging Jesse and he's dragging Jonathan and he's dragging Jonathan's mother, who would be who?
His wife.
His wife through the gutter, and he's saying, you're shaming your mother, you're shaming yourself. It's a shame that she ever bore you, conceived you, and bore you. All of this because you've linked yourself with the son of Jesse. And you think I don't know that? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, you shall not be established. Established how? As the king. So he's telling him, what in the world are you doing? As long as David is living, you're never going to be the king. Well, Jonathan's never going to be the king anyway.
Anyway.
But he is certainly making sure that he's trying to let Jonathan know that it's in your best interest that David be gone, nor your kingdom. Now therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. Well, that tells us right now, this is why he's been looking and searching and had his back up against the wall. I kind of see him with a spear in his hand, eating with one hand and a spear in the other, looking all around.
He's so paranoid. And David has
really
never
is.
shown any, sign that he would do anything threatening to him, but he's just paranoid.
Paranoid and keeps going back and forth, doesn't he? Delusional and saying, and in one sense saying, never, never, as the Lord lives, and then where is he? I'm going to kill him. And he's just got this personality thing happening that is just,
Schizo.
yeah, very bizarre. So then Jonathan answers Saul his father, and he says to him, why should he be killed? What has he done? Well, earlier we saw that he provided a beautiful argument. We read about it, all the things. He's an innocent man. Everything he does is for your benefit. He's done nothing wrong. Here, once again, he brings all that up. Why should he be killed? What has he done? Now we're going to see Saul take it up a notch. Saul cast a spear at him, his own son, to kill him, by which Jonathan knew that it was determined by his father to kill David. You think, Jonathan? He's coming.
Shows you Jonathan's
Wake up,
loyalty
Paul.
to his dad, though. I mean, he's had every reason to believe that for a long, long time now.
He along with David are trying every way they can to make reconciliation
Right.
between
Trying to give him
the
the
two of them.
benefit.
Here we see Saul just flip out and try and use the same method as he did for David to kill him.
Why worry if this guy can't hit anything? He keeps missing. Thank goodness, huh?
Don't you think the Don't you just think the Holy Spirit's just kind of nudging that spear right over? Yeah, I kind of think it is. So Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger, and he ate no food the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David, because his father had treated him shamefully. All right, so he was grieved for David, so he's having this emotional response. Commentaries go back and forth on when it says, and he treated him shamefully. Is he talking about David? He treated David shamefully? Or is it because he treated Jonathan shamefully in front of the kingdom? The main people of the town is he tries to kill him and yells at him and says that about his mother and all of that. So either way, it would be appropriate for either or both.
But David's not handy.
David's not handy, and
So
so Jonathan gets
gets
it.
the brunt.
So Jonathan gets it.
And he hasn't been too nice to either one of them.
He hasn't been too nice to anybody, really.
Yeah.
Michael or anybody.
Yeah.
His wife, saying that
Know
about his
anything
wife.
about his wife? She's a perverse woman.
She's a perverse will and who has does something in
Apparently runs
nakedness.
around naked, yeah.
And so it was in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the time that was appointed with David, and the little lad was with him. So now you're going to see the story that the plan that they came up with. They're going to put it into action. And he says to the lad, now run, find the arrows which I shoot. And as the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. So he's making it pass over. When the lad had come to the place where the arrow was, which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried out to the lad and said the exact words that he told David he would. Is not the arrow beyond you? And Jonathan cried out to the lad, make haste, hurry, do not delay. So Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrows and came back to his master. Then Jonathan gave his weapons to his lad and said to him, hey, go carry these into the city. So that's the plan. We see it in fruition that they came up with. And so now he's giving all of his stuff to the little lad, and he's saying, okay, go back into the city. You're done. All right, now let's see how they end this.
For David, weaponless, which is further.
Say that again.
He's appearing before David without his weapons, which is further. I'm
Yeah.
supporting you and not
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Although, I mean, that's a good point. But although I hope at this point David trusts Jonathan enough to know, but still, it's showing humility. It's respect and humility for him. So as soon as the lad had gone, David arose from a place toward the south, so he's been out there in that area of the field, fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. So this would be 2 things. It would be showing respect, humility, but also grief. Okay, so there's a huge emotional response that's going on here with David. You can almost picture him as he's doing this, wailing, crying, mourning what's going on, because he recognizes all those things that we talked about earlier. This is a division for him. This is huge. He's going to leave the people, the land, the country, the administration, his family, his wife, his brothers, his father, Saul, everyone he's leaving, and also Jonathan. That this is going to be a separation. And so it says they kissed one another and they wept together, but David more so. So that would be for the very reasons that we talked about, that they're both weeping. Jonathan knows what this means. David knows what this means. And Jonathan said to David, go in peace. You know what he would have said to him? Shalom. Shalom. Go in peace. Since we have both sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, may the Lord be between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever. So he arose, that would be Jonathan, and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. So a little background on this. We will find in our future chapters that other than a brief time where they will meet right before Jonathan's death, this is the last time David and Jonathan will spend time together. And so that will explain this weeping and mourning, the grief that both of them are going to feel. They know what this means. Now, David doesn't know what's going to be ahead for him, and Jonathan doesn't know how far his father is going to fall at this point. But the grief is there because of the separation that's going to occur. And this is really their last time to share together. And how did they end it? Other than that the peace would be, the Lord will be, keep the covenant. So recognize throughout this chapter and the previous one, we've talked about the covenant now, 4 times? 4 or 5 times. Keep in mind that the last things they talk about in this last meeting is your descendants and my descendants, this covenant forever between us.
Do you have any idea how